Hello, and welcome to a new episode of NSPE's Committee Corner. I'm your host, Margaret Edwards. And this week, we are going to be talking about the Freedom to Invest in Tomorrow's Workforce Act and use this as an example throughout today's conversation about why committees are a great place for NSPE and for professional engineers to add their voice to the conversation around certain pieces of legislation. So to begin, I think it is important that we revisit the question that started it all here in the committee corner. Why committees? Committees are able to do a lot of things, from just having hearings about certain topics that fall within their jurisdiction, having hearings on legislation or topics that relate to a certain piece of legislation or a bill or something that has been referred to their committee, or marking up and reporting on legislation. And so one, committees can do a lot of things. And two, committees see all legislation. This is the first step in the legislative process. And, in order to create some noise around a piece of legislation, we can target that at committees because eventually they're going to be the ones voting it out of committee and determining whether or not it continues on in the legislative process and continues its chances of being signed into law. So that's a quick overview of why committees. But an example of a bill that we can use to kind of spell this out and really make it a little bit more tangible, this idea of committees, is the Freedom to Invest in Tomorrow's Workforce Act. The Freedom to Invest in Tomorrow's Workforce Act is a bipartisan and bicameral piece of legislation that has been introduced. And the purpose of this bill is to allow individuals to use any remaining funds in a 529 education savings account and use those remaining funds towards achieving the cost of a post-secondary credential. In this case, it can be the professional engineering license. So somebody, if they have any remaining funds in a 529 education savings account, can use those funds to prepare for the FE or the PE exam, can and put that towards the cost of materials or test prep courses or anything that goes along with that, as well as just applying for the license initially. By allowing this to happen, that potentially lowers the barrier to entry for folks for whom cost might be a prohibiting factor of them deciding to not actually apply for and gain their PE license. So this is a very positive bill. It also this bill only strives to accomplish that in changing the tax code and allowing for the use of these remaining funds in an education savings account to be used towards the cost of post-secondary credentialing. So kind of more of the nuts and bolts of the bill. HR 2171, which is the House version of this bill, is sponsored by Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger and Congressman Fred Upton. And then the Senate version of this bill is sponsored by Senator Amy Klobuchar and Senator Mike Braun. This goes back to the bipartisan and bicameral nature of this bill. It has been introduced in both chambers of Congress, and it has a both lead Democratic and lead Republican sponsor on the legislation. Since this is the committee corner, it would be valuable to note which committees that this bill has been referred to in both chambers. In the House, it has been referred to the Ways and Means Committee, and in the Senate, it's been referred to the Finance Committee. And that's really important to know, especially if you have a senator or your member of Congress who sits on either of these committees. That means that you as a constituent, really should be talking with them and engaging them on this bill, and using your power as a constituent to advocate in favor of this, especially because they are on the front lines of who is going to be reviewing this bill in this first pass as it moves through the committee system. That's not to say if you don't have a member who sits on either of these committees that your voice is less important in this scenario. It's certainly not. We definitely need people to be reaching out and creating noise around this bill on Capitol Hill. And, since we are talking about, contacting your legislators, we have an advocacy campaign for the Freedom to Invest in Tomorrow's Workforce Act live and in our NSPE Advocacy Center online. What's really great about this is with pressing one button, you can send off emails and letters to all three of your elected officials in Congress. So your 2 senators and your 1 member of the House. This is a great way to contact your legislators, to let them know what you're thinking, to let them know that you support and are in favor of the Freedom to Invest in Tomorrow's Workforce Act, and asking them to support and sign on as a co-sponsor. We're only going to create some push behind this bill if we're contacting our elected officials and letting them know how we feel, and asking them to throw their support behind this piece of legislation. So please do check out our advocacy center for this and a whole bunch of other ways to contact your legislators, to get involved, to participate in the advocacy efforts and making the voice of the professional engineer known here at NSPE. So with that includes this episode of NSPE's Committee Corner. You can find the Committee Corner in the NSPE Advocacy Center or on the NSPE YouTube page. And before we end today's episode, I want to throw a quick plug for another campaign in our Advocacy Center. So while you're writing to your legislators about the Freedom to Invest in Tomorrow's Workforce Act, check out our campaign where you can submit questions here for the Committee Corner. As part of getting ready for our 25th episode, which will be airing, releasing next month. We want to hear from you. We want to know what questions you have, and we're going to kind of structure that episode more like questions from the audience, and answering them in the final episode for this calendar year, and kind of use that as a way to close out our first year here in the Committee Corner. So for that, until next time, we hope you'll tune in next episode. Thank you.